Okay, Scott, thanks so much for jumping on with us today. Another episode of the Engage Nation podcast. This isn't your first rodeo sharing a forum of some sort with Engage M. You shared a stage with Tim Barber, I think. Was it last year at iSports Connect at the Emirates? Is that right?
Yeah, it was really good to meet Tim. We've stayed connected. So he's fantastic. Excited to be back. Round two is going to be even better than round one. The host this time, don't tell Tim, far superior.
I'm going to tell Tim. But yeah, and he'll just find out anyway. But I'll absolutely tell him. Well, let's see how we go. We've got a long way to go before we'll call that game. Um, let's start at the start, mate. I know you've probably done this a few times, but it's great for our listeners to hear a little bit about your background, right? So, um, such an interesting journey, sort of being sort of a video intern and working your way through different team professional sports teams. Yeah, give us a short story, please.
Yeah, I don't know how to do the short story. Do the short story as quickly as I possibly can. But yeah, I've basically spent 17 years working in professional sports. I got my start with the San Francisco 49ers in 2006 after working at USC when I was in College University of Southern California in Los Angeles. For kind of 3 years, I was a part of the athletic department there, working on football, basketball, volleyball, all sorts of sports. But I knew that's what I wanted to do. So I applied and I interviewed with the 49ers and the Raiders on the same day, got a job with the Niners, starting out basically doing website videos. So that was very difficult to do back then in 2006. There wasn't a ton of teams kind of doing that, but that's what I was tasked with. Job evolved into social media, started all of our social accounts, launched a couple different mobile apps with them, the team app, the Levi Stadium app. They built an amazing stadium there in Santa Clara. And then the opportunity came up in 2015 to join the Minnesota Vikings. Basically, my task was to take everything we did in 9 years in Minnesota, and we had about 1 year before they opened US Bank Stadium. So we had to kind of build and evolve our team to be ready to hit that milestone. It's just kind of it's critical for sports organizations. You're affecting generations of fans over the life of that building. US Bank Stadium is absolutely beautiful for folks who haven't been out there. Definitely recommend checking that out. And then was there for 7 years, led digital and social in Minnesota, some of our international marketing as well. And then came down to AMB Sports and Entertainment. So my role now is kind of sitting in between Mercedes-Benz Stadium, the Atlanta Falcons, and Atlanta United. So kind of my first MLS season. I'm excited about starting here in just a couple of days. So it'll be exciting going through that. But my team oversees digital product, email marketing or MarTech stack, UI, UX, project management and operations for our digital group. Plus, then we have on each side with the Falcons and United, kind of the digital content team. So social, digital or editorial teams, etc. So that's kind of what's got me to where I am. Mercedes-Benz Stadium. I've been fortunate to work in three amazing venues over the course of my career too. So that's pretty exciting as well.
Wicked. There's loads there. So it's so interesting. I want to go back to where you said you started the social media channels. Probably we won't say how long ago it was, Scott, just for your own
Too long,
reputation and
yeah.
all that sort of stuff. But how did you know what to do? Because I think it's such a native part of any sort of content and marketing strategy. And these are brand new platforms that have just come out. Don't really, everyone's kind of feeling their way around in the dark a little bit, let alone on an individual level, let alone a professional sports team that is a big brand and has and a great history. So, how careful were you? How risk taking were you? What did you do first? What was the approach?
Well, it was your question kind of reminds me. I went back to USC in Annenberg TV News, and I talked to the sports group there. This was a few years ago, maybe 2018, 19, something like that. And I was talking to one of the girls who worked in the sports department. She was talking about what they did on, I believe at the time we were talking about Snapchat and some of the Instagram stories features and things like that. It blew my mind. And I just vastly saw kind of how generationally things had changed, where now students are coming up and they graduate college with so much experience in those areas. And I immediately thought to myself, man, if this was back in 2008, 2009, like I would have loved to have had that experience kind of going into launching Twitter for the 49ers. Also, just how people use the platforms is vastly different. Like if you look at old school Twitter, it's completely different than the way people use it now. Like a lot more kind of like just kind of breaking news or updates or like more stream of consciousness type of stuff personally, but then for teams kind of relating to, schedules or quotes that somebody had at a press conference, things like that. And like that, not really the same. You also didn't have as many tools available as part of those platforms. But I remember talking about it with our writer at the Niners at the time, who we kind of assisted on a lot of the social accounts. We both worked on them frequently. We talked about we're literally throwing stuff against the wall and seeing what sticks. That's how social media started out. When we started Instagram, I don't think I've brought this up before on a podcast or speaking engagement, but I think this is a pretty good story. When Instagram came out, it was originally only for iPhones. And so we had Blackberries back in the day, and I was one of the first folks in our organization that had an Android. And I was very upset about that because we then couldn't start an Instagram account. So we went out to the Combine in Indianapolis. I had an iPod Touch, like personal iPod Touch. And I was frustrated because we couldn't get an iPhone. So I thought to myself, I'm just going to start our Instagram account on the iPod Touch, connect to Wi-Fi every time. And that's how we're going to start our social media account. It did extremely well. Looking back, the content was incredibly poor, but also that's kind of what people were using Instagram for at the time. It was just, take a photo on your, on your phone and immediately post it. Like some filters, quality was not great. And so I think we just had folks at the podium at the Combine and some of their quotes. And we saw just how much we grew in the course of a week out there. And we posted pretty regularly. And so it wasn't too long after that we got iPhones, and then we could continue posting Instagram. But it was a little bit posting on Instagram and starting our account and developing our strategy over time. But a lot of that, like you really were just trying things for the first time and see what works. So it's like, I think when there's new channels that come out or people that just start doing different things on different channels, it's really inspiring. There's not just kind of a right and a wrong way to do things. Everybody kind of has different strategies that might fit their business, and that's fine. We can all kind of learn from each other. I think the nice part about it is there's still, those were launched in 2008, 2009. Now 14 years later, there's still no, right and wrong. There's still a lot of experimenting and learning, which is kind of the cool part about what we get to do.
Absolutely. And so you've been at a few different teams now. Let's just say, I know that A&B Sports and Entertainment covers more than the Falcons, but just for the sake of this, you've got the Falcons, the Niners, and the Vikings. How different are they? So, obviously different demographics, different locations. Going through that, I think this is always the measure of, how good someone is at something, is whether they just go, right, I'm just going to copy and paste my blueprint that I did at one place. I'm just going to do it the same again and again. And it does pretty well. So I'm just going to keep doing that. That would be an option. But ultimately, there's these fan bases are really different. And they might consume their content a different way. They engage with their team a different way. How are they different between those three things? In probably a multitude of ways.
Yeah, I think that would be, I could spend a day talking about just kind of like some of the differences and kind of the way you learn. There's also a ton of similarities too. But in terms of strategy, it isn't replicable from one place to another. You really do have to kind of structure things to the market. You also have to play to the strengths of your team. Just even roles and responsibilities are vastly different. There's like one example, right? Like just from Minnesota to here, Minnesota, we ran all of our content kind of through, a few folks on our digital team that packaged all of that content together. The way that we're set up now in with the Falcons and then also at the Niners, some of the writers, our editorial team or kind of production team might actually be posting some of the content. Those are very different strategies, and not to just kind of dive in on like one detail, but even just some of those processes are different. How you work together on game days, the strengths of your team are different. The equipment that you're using is different, and that's fine. I think like for folks to come in and think that they have to do things a certain way and that's the only way to kind of get things done, I think that can kind of trip you up. Really, so I've been here 8 months with the organization. The thing that I wanted to do first was just build relationships with the team, know, get to know them, get to know what they're good at, get to know where our strengths are, where there's opportunities to improve. We also onboarded an entirely new social staff on the Falcons side this season. On the United side, they have a brand new team president, Apple TV deal. Like, there's a lot of things that are certainly different, and just kind of also asked a question about markets too. Teams have different personalities. I think that's kind of one of the fun things for me has been over the course of my career. I've been at both places for quite a while, in 9 years and 7 years. I got to know the personalities of those teams and those fan bases over the course of close to a decade in kind of both places. What they respond to, the different communities, different traditions, different rituals, those types of things certainly play a factor into kind of the content that we produce. We can be a little bit different from place to place, but yes, there are certainly similarities. There are certain things for me that are extremely important. Communication, how we communicate, especially on game days, is critical. That's actually probably something that we've done fairly similarly in each place. But that's more of an operations perspective. Like, we're still doing very different things within that. But that's something that I think is critical to success when the bullets are flying. How you communicate with one another is critical.
Yeah, 100%. And if we probably looked at your career to date, it would look like, pretty success after success, new team, promotions. It's been a great ride. You clearly enjoyed it. But how about a time where something didn't work? What was it looks like it all worked from here. But what's something that you thought, you spent a lot of time when you thought this would work, and it may not have been an absolute I'm trying not to swear here, but an absolute stuff up. But something that didn't land as much as you expected it to.
This wasn't a complete stuff up, but the one thing that kind of stands out, and it ended up being like kind of one of the better moments, but we probably did the wrong thing first. So in hindsight, right? So the Minneapolis Miracle with the Vikings. So Stephon Diggs walk-off touchdown against the New Orleans Saints, and the divisional round to go on and play in the NFC Championship game is probably the greatest moment in Vikings team history. So that's one of those times. We had our team had been together for a couple of years at that time. We kind of knew what kind of post-game roles were and who was doing what. And we'd actually invested in a lot of new kind of video equipment. So I was down on the field with a gimbal and captured a kind of a sideline angle of that play. And then kind of ran over to the pile, and everybody jumps on Stephon and he throws his helmet. And anyways, we go back, and normally I would tweet the post-game press conferences, or that was kind of my role that year. And so I ran up to the press box. So I was like, I got to see everything that we've got. Told our social manager, he stayed down there, did that piece of it, ran back up, and I started looking through footage. One of the pieces of content that we had that I thought was kind of the best and the most different, right? Like, everybody has the on-field angle. And so I'm in the locker room, and I get Stephon Diggs talking to Case Keenum, who's the quarterback for the team at the time, and he comes in and throws water on Case, like from behind. Doesn't Stephon or Case didn't see Stephon, gets doused with water, and then they turn around and they see each other for the first time. They'd all been kind of in different places. You get pulled in different places, like the first time they see each other. I thought it was such a cool moment. And they look at each other and it's like, I don't know what happened. And Case was like, I don't know what happened either. And they just like hugged each other. I was like, this is great. Nobody's seen this. This is the first piece of content. Let's just clip this off, post it on social. It did fine. Like, I mean, everything was doing well after that game. But then afterwards, I was like, what did I actually capture of the play? Normally, we've that year, we need to kind of post it from like the TV copy. And I was like, gosh, we have great stuff on like the sideline and whatnot too. And so I capture it, the play kind of runs alongside. And then he's in the end zone, gets dogpiled. And I'm like, he's too far away from, like, I need to be over there. So I just start running. Of course, it's on a gimbal, so it like looks okay, but like a little Blair Witch Project-y. And I'm sitting there and saying like, okay, well, do I cut out that point where I run? Like, I don't know. And like our social manager came up, Zach, at the time, and I was like, I'm thinking of just leaving this. Like, I think this is just like, it's kind of more authentic. Like, let's just leave it. Let's go. So that video ended up being the most viewed video in team history too, but that was the thing that came second. And then you started seeing like Rich Eisen retweeted it, and Schefter and all that stuff. So you just start getting blown up in messages, and like the next thing you know, there's 10 million views on a video. But I still always look back and I think to myself, like, it was a great moment. Yes. It was like, we tweeted kind of the wrong thing first. At the end of the day, I was like, why didn't we just go with that? I don't know if that would have changed anything. Maybe waiting a little bit almost helped. Would it have done better? I don't know. I just think like kind of the moral of the story there is just like having those conversations in real time about what's captured and making those decisions in terms of the order that things go out. When people, all eyeballs are on you, and you have those moments when you're in the playoffs, like those are critical things. And so in the end, it's kind of a happy mistake. It's still like worked out okay. So anyways, we didn't totally screw up, but still, I always look back on that and use that as almost as a lesson of like kind of what not to do or how to improve things the next time.
It reminds me of like the job interview question when they ask, "What's your biggest weakness?" and you say, "I work too hard." It's
No, but like,
yeah,
but I really do. I mean, there's been so many
I
times,
know.
even, a couple, like 2 years later, we were in the same situation at New Orleans. And I honestly don't remember the exact situation, but it was just trying to get everybody together and talking about, hey, what we post and when. And we probably put the wrong thing out at the time. It was like, hey, no, let's go back to this. Let's go back to the communication. So definitely don't mean it as what's the biggest. I've worked too hard. I definitely don't mean it like that. I just think it stresses the importance of it, because you literally, like, could we have missed? What if we missed that moment? Like we
Yeah.
ended up being okay, but what if we did? That's still, I don't know, in a weird way, kind of haunts me every time I think about it.
It's like the opportunity cost, though, isn't it? You can't see
Hmm.
it, but if you miss it, you kind of can't tell. You'll never know.
Yeah.
But I also think there's something about, you know, you always have a strategy for, what you're going to do this season, or, what content you're going to share. But this feels like a real sort of real time. You've got to think on your feet. You've got minutes to make a decision on, whether you're going to, for example, choose the bit where you're running, and include that. And, that feels like, if as long as you've got the tools at your disposal, that feels a lot like instinct to me.
Yeah. Somebody asked me kind of like, what made you stand right there for the play? I was like, well, at the time I'd covered 14 years of football games dating back to college. It's like, okay, if
Mm,
there's going to be something that happens that's good for us, it's probably happening about here. Like when we need to get into field goal range, this is where like the catch could kind of happen. and then you just get lucky, but you do that based off of the experience that you have too. And definitely too, like one of the things our old COO at the Vikings, who's now the president of the Chicago Bears, Kevin Warren, was at the Big Ten as their commissioner in between those stops. He would always say, kind of be 19 win ready, right? Like, so what's the best possible thing that can happen, right? You win every single game. I think since he said that, the NFL has added another regular season game. So maybe it's 20 win ready potentially. But anyways, moral of the story, you want to be able to have everything in place to where if you finish the season undefeated and win the Super Bowl and it's the greatest season that's ever happened in the history of the NFL, like, are you ready for that? Because you don't know when that's going to be. I mean, we look back on it and, when the Niners played in the Super Bowl, we weren't able to get, kind of some budget for some new camera equipment leading into that game. We even had to like kind of rent some cameras that we weren't super trained on. So it's like, okay, fast forward to 2017, like we made sure we had the right camera equipment. Like it led to that video happening. So sometimes it's just those failures early on or just those learning moments. Like every opportunity is a moment to learn, get better. You might not even realize it at the time or make a conscious decision about that, but your decisions might be impacted several years later, and you might not even consciously realize that that's happening.
Yeah, no, couldn't agree more. I think that's the best thing about the whole, I call it marketing, comms, brand, all the above. You're always testing and learning. I think that's the fun part,
Mm-hmm.
but it's also you've just got to be adaptive. You got to adapt quickly all the time. Bit of a chameleon, I suppose. But it's really interesting how quickly things change, even at the NFL level.
Mm-hmm.
Let's talk a little bit more about audience. We were talking about platforms and stuff before, and that, and that led me to think about, do you get your audience in the room, right? So I don't know, you've got different personas, no doubt, but one of those is certainly your Gen Z audience. You know, and you were talking about your team as well, and potentially a newly formed one. Do you hire Gen Z to get that lens? Obviously they'll have a skill set too, and you said they come in with those. But it is also the added benefit of them just having a lens going, I'd watch that, I wouldn't watch that, that sucks. No, that's awesome. That, and the older we get, Scott, the more detached we are from possibly from Gen Z. You start
Exactly.
making assumptions, you start getting it wrong. So yeah, tell us a bit about how you start to make up those teams internally.
Yeah, well, as I've gone on in my career, I've started to realize, and you have to accept it, that in a lot of cases you're probably not your target audience, which is fine. You just want to be able to, like, my role now is to really enable our creators to create on those platforms, right? To just worry about creating engaging content, to set the kind of the North Star, why we're doing that, um, what our ultimate goals are, what our platform strategy is, right? So, but then after that, they can go out and they can create kind of within those, not really within those guidelines, but you know what I'm saying? Just kind of, with that in mind, that's where we're ultimately kind of trying to get to. And that's how we create good content now. So it's like um, on the Falcons side, one of our folks, our social strategist who started at the start of the year, out of ASU, she's an intern for the Arizona Cardinals, and then came to us. She has a very different, view on content, and is adding a lot of fun and kind of personality to what we're doing. And I think folks kind of gravitate a bit more to the platforms that they kind of identify with too, which is good. Like, you need to have that mix on your team because you're hitting a different, audience on those different platforms. So to be able to have folks that can kind of specifically focus on TikTok as kind of one of their primaries, or Instagram or Facebook, right? Like, you want to be able to have those folks on your team. So you need to be diverse in that. And it's not just from an age range, right? Like, gender, ethnicities, right? Like you want to have people from different backgrounds, from different places in the United States, because they're all bringing in kind of their different backgrounds and upbringing and things like that that have influenced ultimately their perception on kind of what we're doing. And one of the sayings I have is like, I can have a good idea, you can have a good idea, like we can have a great idea, right? Like it's all additive. So when we put all of that together, that's going to be when we're creating our best content. So whether that's Gen Z and Gen X, right? Like there's still a way to millennials. You still want to be able to talk to kind of a wide, scope of your audience, and you're talking to them differently on those different channels.
I love the way you sort of empower your team to do that too. It's sort of a principle led focus and go, here's the principles, this is rough, this is the direction we're kind of going in, but you're empowered to go and do your thing. You guys know how to create wicked stuff. And as long as you know that, I don't know, you just get that creative license to go for it and create some really sort of personal stuff that, 95% of the time will probably be on the right if you've got, bang on, if you've got the right principles sitting behind it, but they're not sitting in front, I suppose is probably the way to do it. That's amazing. So we'll pivot again. Let's have a look at the MLS. I think that's probably I've been in the UK for the last 6 years, and that's starting to, I don't know, get a little bit more noticed on a global scale. It's not just a place where former superstars are put out to pasture. Now it's which it has been the A League has been a little bit like that. We had some 40-something-year-olds running around in the final leagues. It was great because you get some of these fans get to see these absolute rock stars come and play. So how are we balancing that sort of for you strategically? You've got the team there on a growing global scale, but locally, that's growing as well. Is it different between your strategy for those two things from a digital perspective, I guess? Anyway.
Yeah, I mean, I think they're additive. And kind of speaking, and I'll kind of get into the MLS piece of it too. But in Minnesota, we had we had international markets as part of the NFL's kind of international marketing initiatives, right? But we talked about that as like how all of those things are connected as part of the overall strategy. You shouldn't have an international strategy and a domestic strategy. You have a marketing strategy. It may extend now abroad into different markets. I think that's, to a large degree where the MLS is too. I mean, the Apple TV deal is fantastic. Streaming's changed the game. You're able to be in households across the globe now with that new opportunity. We have a large, following in Mexico and Argentina because of some of the players on the team. Those folks can now watch games basically all the time. You can watch games in Spanish. You have the Spanish language option, right? Like with a lot of the matches, that's really, really important. Atlanta United, the thing that excites me about it, I mean, the large, in one sense, they're kind of the Dallas Cowboys of the MLS, right? Like they're a huge brand, have won a cup. We're going to be hosting the World Cup in 2026. I mean, there's a lot of the global soccer community is going to have their eyes fixated on Atlanta in 2.5 years. That's extremely exciting. It's a huge opportunity for the organization, for the sport of soccer, growing that locally, growing that globally. I think that there's the Apple TV deal is one step in that direction, but there's so much that we can do globally, and the MLS can still do to continue to grow in that direction. I don't know if you're going to compete with the likes of, the EPL anytime soon, but as soccer kind of grows globally, like we have those ambitions to continue to grow the sport and have, if somebody has Chelsea as their favorite team, right? Like, can their next favorite team be Atlanta United? I think that those are, good conversations that we have and kind of realistic goals that we can try to set.
Yeah, I think that's probably similar to Australian basketball fans in that they'll have an
Yeah.
NBA team or a player probably, but they might want to. But their second team is absolutely maybe their hometown team, or maybe not. They might just
Hmm.
like a couple of players, or they know someone. So yeah, I
Yeah.
think that's actually a pretty good shout, mate. Um, and yeah, and it's probably a realistic one too, right? And it's not this or that; it's as well as.
Hmm. Yeah. I mean, people are fans of multiple teams, right? Like you're not, an Atlanta Hawks fan or, Atlanta Falcons fan. Like you're fans of kind of both teams across both sports. You can be fans of, international and I think you're going to see that more. I think that's going to become more commonplace, like with streaming deals and the accessibility of it and how those global rights have extended in other leagues. It's become a lot easier to watch English Premier League games like over the last decade in the States, so like the growth of Formula One, right? Like you look at these sports and kind of how they've taken root in other places. Just as like kind of pop culture is becoming a bit more kind of global. Like there's not a, I mean there is, but it's not necessarily like just specific. Like there's only an American pop culture and only an Australian pop culture, right? Like Rihanna gets on stage at the Super Bowl and like everybody can kind of identify with that. Like it's just like that's changing.
Yeah, 100%. It's really interesting. I was speaking to Jordan Colosi from the Spurs VP of Strategy and Innovation there on this very show. And he was talking about a similar discussion around international fans. And while normally it would be Atlanta's your town, that's you've got no competition there. Nobody else can really touch Atlanta fans. That's your spot, and certainly for the Spurs, that was within a certain mile radius of downtown San Antonio. That's theirs. The battleground opens up when you start to look internationally and trying to gain some fans there. Is that the same? So, you mentioned Mexico, for example. I imagine there's some other teams that especially some of those teams nearby geographically, that have quite a lot of Mexican fan base. What is it the same? Is that sort of similar vibe with you and your teams?
Yeah, to some extent, like when there's a new market that opens, that creates new opportunity, it creates new competition. So in that respect, like yes, you are competing. We said a lot of times like, you compete on the field, but you don't necessarily compete off the field. I think when you look at kind of the global growth though of the game, that still is very competitive, because those are uncharted markets. Um, it's so much more difficult, and I'll kind of go back to Minneapolis Miracle story because um, I told a group uh, kind of a conference, and I told the story of kind of like the brand building around that and kind of the Bring It Home campaign that went into that. A girl came up after that, and I talked about the campaign, and it ended with the Minneapolis Miracle, and she came up and she said, hey, it was kind of because of this Bring It Home campaign. I just moved from Chicago. I didn't know anybody in Minneapolis. I was staying downtown, and she said, some of my friends had their Bring It Home gear, and they came over and said, hey, do you want to watch the game? They're all kind of swept up in it. She's like, we went and we watched the game. I had my Bring It Home hat that they gave me. She's like, honestly, because of that, it just, she's like, I got emotional listening to you talk, because now Minneapolis feels like home. I have friends here. Like the Vikings are my team. Like, so if you take somebody from a Bears fan to a fan of another team, look at what you need to have happen, right? When we first started doing kind of some international marketing when the 49ers played in the UK, I reached out to his then the head of the Twitter sports office in the UK, Lewis Wilcher, who was a 49ers fan, and I asked him like to put me in touch with some folks over there. He's like, oh, hey, talk to Brian. He's the head of a UK 49ers fan club. I asked him, hey, how did you? It's really hard to watch games over there. Like all the 49ers games are kind of what it would have been 4 o'clock Eastern time, so that's like 9 o'clock in the UK. So those games are on extremely late. You're staying up until midnight to watch those games. Let alone if it's a primetime game, it's coming on at 1 in the morning a lot of times. He told me a story, and sorry, I'm kind of rambling with this, but told me a story
No, not
about
a,
like, he's like, oh, it's kind of like a version of like your American Cracker Jacks, but we have this candy. Um, and he's like, one of my friends got this and he got NFL keychains. He's like, oh, he um, got a Dallas Cowboys keychain, and I was upset that he had a favorite team and I didn't. So I went out and I bought Cracker Jacks, and then I got my 49ers keychain. And so he's like, then we did some research and we realized that these teams were kind of rivals, that they were joining kind of in that Niners Cowboys rivalry phase. He's like, that had me hooked. The guy is now one of the biggest team ambassadors in the UK for the San Francisco 49ers. And it's all because of a keychain and a Cracker Jack box. Like, so you can either have the best moment in team history mixed with a really good marketing campaign, or you can just show up, right? Like step one, show up, but put keychains in Cracker Jack boxes. Do it in a way that makes it fun for people, that they can build a community and feel like they're part of something, even if they're rivals kind of with one of their friends. I think that that's why kind of the international growth of the game is so kind of compelling to me. To some extent, it's a bit uncharted. There's a lot of folks that are looking for a favorite team to root for, or a community really to be a part of. And so that's what we've kind of tried to do in the past in some of the places that I've been, is build those international communities that can kind of tell our story for us in a lot of cases.
if the Falcons and the United run out next season with Cracker Jack across the front of their jerseys, I know what happened.
Yeah, we sold a cracker. Well, I don't even know. I need to go back and look at like what the name of that actual candy was. But it was, I thought that was just a really cool story, about how folks kind of picked teams that they rooted for back in like the late 90s, early 2000s for the NFL. And so just by showing up and being there and being present, you do make an impact on people a lot more than you say that in like kind of the digital age. Just giving people touch points. Like they want to feel like they're a bit more connected to the teams, and as opposed to just kind of following along on television.
Yeah, no, for sure. So when you work with such big teams now, and we sort of touched on it when you were saying, using some of that raw, authentic, type of content. How do you balance that between being, a professional sports team that posts, the lineups for the game and, all that pretty,
Mm-hmm.
stock standard stuff, to the more raw stuff? And I suppose, how do you figure out where that line is? Because I've seen on Twitter, I've seen social media managers of certain sports teams get in a lot of trouble for posting certain things, because they forgot where the line was, or they missed it, or
Mm-hmm.
it was a bit like, this is
Yeah.
great for Twitter and Twitter world loves it, but the team's like, probably can't do that. Where do you know where the line is?
I think the first thing is to understand that you're part of the business. And so I think when you look at things through that lens first, that leads to you not making some of those bad decisions. That doesn't mean that you shouldn't push the envelope. You shouldn't have incredibly fun and engaging content. But you do work for and represent an organization in a very public way. Um, that being said, like you don't want to curtail creativity. Like, try, like, fail fast. Like, let's try different things. We should never ask ourselves the question like, oh, well, I saw another team do this. Like, so let's do, like, try to look for inspiration from other places. Don't necessarily look for inspiration just from other teams. Look at other leagues, look at other, pop culture accounts, or like late night television, right? Like they do incredibly engaging stuff, even just kind of with some of the content they're creating and the skits that they do. Like all of them think outside the box. Like, was it James Corden's Crosswalk? Crosswalk the musical, where he performs like musical numbers in a crosswalk. Like that's wildly original and entertaining. And he didn't get that idea from, looking at other late night TV show accounts, right? Like we should push ourselves to do that. So within the confines of, you understand the business that you're working for and the objectives that you have, and whether that be ticket sales or, maximizing revenue, those types of things, but doing so in a really engaging way that, we're creating compelling content, we're creating different content, and we're ultimately creating the fans that are, or the content that our fans want to see.
For sure. Yeah, no, I understand that. It goes back to the principles conversation we were having earlier around if you've got those behind you, you should roughly know what to do with
Mm-hmm.
those parameters set, I suppose. Um, and from a business, if we're going to talk about business, then from a business perspective, all this stuff let think of the I don't know, the finance department when we're talking about, and they were listening to this and they're like, oh, they create all these fun campaigns and videos, and it just sounds like a good old time. But so what? What's the so what? What's the so what once you might do a report for the board or similar, and you're in some of these rooms with executives now going, yeah, we got heaps of these views and stuff, and like we got heaps of likes. What's the so what? What do they want to hear? We could talk about ROI, but it's a slippery slope. But it's that'd be interesting to hear because it's only getting bigger and better. And imagine when you started social media, they probably didn't even know what it was when you said, "I started a Snapchat account."
Mm-hmm.
So, well, yeah, that's maturing, and it's a much more important conversation now. But yeah, what do they want to hear?
Well, I think like kind of one of the things, when you take a step back and it's like, what does any like media organization look for when they're creating content and they're putting things on, different platforms? When you go into the partnership, say it's, NBC Sports, right? Like you're creating content on these different platforms. You want to be able to, I don't know, create the, Manning cast, like the simulcast, right? Like it's not just like, oh, these guys want to like have fun and, have the Mannings on there entertaining. I'm sure that'll be a blast, right? Like you're doing it because you think that there's a market for it. You think that that speaks to a different type of audience that might be watching the main feed. You think that you're going to get more eyeballs, overall on like that piece of content, than how you share that content out, right? Like those are additional eyeballs and kind of digital channels. I don't think that the way that we approach content on like the sports side is that vastly different. No, I said I used NBC Sports as the example, and then I just talked about Monday Night Football, but so that wasn't really apples to apples. But in that instance, like those are, I think, comparable in a lot of respects. So yes, we have the onus on us to also drive tickets and communicate what the fans need to do and take advantage of in the stadium, and market a lot of the really cool things that our stadium might be doing, whether it's frictionless markets, biometric entry, AR activations in the stadium for the new United kit launch, like those types of things, sustainability efforts. Like, yes, we want to market that too, but we can create really cool and engaging content campaigns the same way that an ESPN or an NBC would look at that too. So I don't think that it's vastly different from kind of how media companies might approach that revenue conversation with their finance teams.
Sure, because the strategies of the business, regardless of what department you're in, they should align, right?
Yeah.
So you're just
Mm-hmm.
it's just your contribution towards that ticket goal or that attendance goal, whatever it is. Yeah, you're just sort of doing your part as long as it's sort of all matched up and streamlined, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Okay, cool. So you started talking about like AR and stuff, which got me thinking as well. If we look at the decades, the last few decades, especially in this space, the 2000s was like websites. The 2010s was social media. The 20s, I know we're starting to get into it, and I probably could guess, but what's the 2020s? Do you think are going to be what's going to be new there? What's your sort of oh, I just did Snapchat on my iPod, on my touch because I just needed to start it, and let's see what happens. I don't really know what I'm doing. What's that version for the 2020s?
Um, I think kind of one of the simple answers is like I'm very intrigued, and I'm not the only person saying this. I think everybody's saying this is just the impact that AI is going to have on kind of some of the things that we do from a content creation standpoint. Um, so certainly that's going to change a lot of things, and we probably don't even really know at this point kind of how that's going to change things. but that's going to be a really interesting one to watch. I think for folks, maybe this is kind of going a slightly different route, not just specifically with content. But one thing that's kind of relevant to my role is just kind of how technology affects the fan experience, like how that might make it easier. Right now, our technology team has a program where you can walk in with your face, right? So there's a few teams that are kind of piloting some of these programs. We're rolling that out even more at Mercedes-Benz Stadium. It's really been exciting over the course of the last several months, 6 months, 7 months, to see that number grow, how that could evolve and how that affects you, even just buying concessions, being able to walk in. Could that same technology be applied to, a market where you just go grab a hot dog and walk away? Like, I just think that the days, kind of using the Blockbuster example, right? Like, Blockbuster said everybody likes going to the movie store, and it's like, well, like I always say, like, raise your hand if you like waiting in line. Well, that's like the concessions experience that people have been used to in the stadium for so long. Like, how can you change that? How can you make that easier? We're ultimately going to be competing with television technology that continues to improve, and now you're telling somebody to sit in the 300 level, right? Like, just to be there and be in the environment. How can you aid a lot of the friction points of just going to a game or going to a soccer match, and be able to make that experience, like, yes, the environment is additive, but we don't want anything within that environment to take away from their experience either. So I'm really excited. Like, COVID's changed things a ton. Like, technology advanced very quickly in that to solve some of those problems. I think it grew up incredibly quickly in 2 short years, and now it's kind of starting to kind of stabilize and normalize, and you're starting to see kind of what technology makes it and breaks through. Maybe that was a longer answer than you wanted me to say, but that was kind of just some of my thoughts in terms of how technology can kind of improve that fan experience.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I think, yeah, AI is, everyone just says AI and goes, cool. Yeah, definitely. Yeah. But for practical examples of that and seeing that come out, and just general advancement in tech is certainly from an in-game experience. I mean, we were little, being able to order your food beforehand, and you sitting in
Hmm.
your seat and someone bringing it over. I can imagine many delivery bikes run around the stadium dropping food off for people. It's like a mini version. Um, that's going to happen. It's got to. Um, One thing when you talk about TV versus people being in the venue, you guys just built Ticketmaster Studios, which
Hmm.
looks absolutely epic. I mean, from your perspective, that's just the dream, right? Because if people haven't seen that, just Google Ticketmaster Studios and have a look at the setup they've got over there. Tell us a little bit about it. Tell us what you'll be able to do with it. Because I imagine by the time, and it's quite new, right? So still starting to trial some stuff, but for next season, what can we expect?
Yeah, so Ticketmaster Studios, one, our the vision of our ownership to be able to let us embark on that, which started well before I got here, and then a lot of the senior leaders on our team who pushed for it and tried to make that happen. It's a giant expansion off of one side of the training facility, so right off of the cafeteria, is now a whole media area with 2 studios, 2 control rooms. We can actually run, 2 productions at the same time. We have limited time with our players. So to be able to record a podcast and record an interview in the studio, plus we have a studio B where you could be getting photos or kind of some additional kind of non-control room tied in type of content in there. We can do that all at the same time. So if you give us an hour, we'll make the best possible use of that hour with the players. It's also just space. like being able to have that on premises so that when we do our creative days and capture a lot of the content for video boards and for our digital platforms before the season, we can do that all on premises now, which is fantastic. We don't have to kind of set up some temporary things there. So Austin Hill, who's our director of production there, has spearheaded that project. The studio is incredibly versatile. There's three different kind of spaces within it where there's kind of like that sit down environment. We have the studio with some beautiful boards behind it, and then kind of a stand up, more of like kind of a telestration set. But all of that can be used, whether it's any of those types of environments, or if we want to move a lot of things kind of out of the way and be able to create space for kind of different purposes. We have a ton of flexibility in the space, which is great. We also have a dedicated room for NFL Network, a dedicated room for our media as well. So yeah, if people want to Google Atlanta Falcons Ticketmaster Studios, you can see all of the great things that Austin and the Falcons production and digital team are going to be cranking out.
You'll actually find the studio I'm in is probably pretty similar to the one you've just built, actually. Yeah, it's about
It
the
looks
same, mate.
similar. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So just use your imagination. Do you reckon, I don't know, this one, I probably know what the answer is to this, but I just wanted, I was just thinking when you were saying that you've built this massive studio for an ESPN style broadcast, like that level, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is there any danger of losing that sort of raw, authentic, sort of content? Is that almost like, make sure we don't forget this stuff because this is so polished, so high quality, that, let's not forget, harking back to, you're running on most viewed clip ever. This
Mm-hmm.
is the stuff that they, want to see as well.
Yeah, not everything is done out of the studio, but it's nice to have that space when you need it so that even if
Oh
it's
yeah.
not just like kind of the main ESPN style studio, Studio B has a cyc wall that we can light differently. So it's like if you want to just have an amazing looking, like kind of solid white, like infinite background, we can do that as well. So that's really when we kind of talk about storytelling. Like those are the spaces that we're using to do a lot of that. When we kind of talk about that real-time content capture, like we're doing that in different places, or some of the stuff that's more authentic. I think, when you do turn on the lights, and stick a camera in somebody's face, they act differently. When you throw a GoPro on a golf cart and drive around and just talk to somebody, they have a very different type of response to you. So you want to make it so that you can kind of make it a little bit more intimate and a little bit more personal for our athletes as well.
For sure. Yeah. No, big difference between the two types of answers you get.
Mm-hmm.
And the
Yeah,
way they act, as you
give them
said.
a cell phone post game, and you're going to get a different type of deal. And then, when NBC comes in and there's a camera and like a light on top of it, and it's like, tell us how the game went, and it's okay, like answer mode. I got to be you want to be able to get some of the raw, kind of more authentic stuff. So it certainly is a balance to answer your question.
Yeah. Both teams play hard, but our guys fought tonight, just every time. Every time. Yeah. I mean, it's funny. The articles I might read if I'm a big Denver Nuggets fan, and if I'm going to read stuff about the game, I'm much more likely to jump on Twitter and see what they're all saying rather than read the post-game press
Mm-hmm.
version, which is super washed because I just kind of know what they're going to say already. So yeah, again, I'm not the only target audience, Scott. There's more than me, but it's certainly. I'd also think it's also a bit of a trend too.
Yeah, well, we got to create content for you too. So that's important. You are the target audience.
Thanks, mate. That's good. It's nice. Feel special. Um, um, we're not too far away. I just want to rattle off a couple of things. You've done some. You seem to have a knack for naming things. You had a Vine off, God rest its soul, which basically is TikTok now.
Pour one out. Yeah.
Uh, I know, pouring out. And it was probably when you were crossing over, I'm guessing, between the 49ers and the Vikings, and you called them the Vine Kings, and the San Francisco 40 Viners, which is just just must just come naturally to stuff, mate. Tell us a little bit about that. What was that? And then
Well,
tell us
first of
about
all,
and then tell us about the Skull Sisters, because everyone want to know that one too.
yeah, well, I don't know if I can take total credit for the 40 Viners, but the best ideas are stolen. So we were going into the playoffs one year. I honestly can't remember like exactly when. And we started kind of do some stop motion content on Vine, kind of working with a creator that was part of an agency that we worked with. And they just kind of wanted to try some different stuff. And we're like, hey, yeah, like let's do, kind of just experiment and ideate it. And, we put that out there and we didn't have a name. It was just kind of good game preview content. And somebody responded and they were like, oh, this is great. It's the 40 Viners. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is gold. Like we have to do something with this immediately. Like everybody stop what you're doing. Stop what you're doing right now. We need to make this happen. And so anyways, we, the next year I Googled, like best Vine artists in the Bay Area. And one person's name came up. His name's Ian Padgham. He was one of the original content creators at Twitter. And then he started doing a lot of content, on Vine. One of the things he did, it was shot all on his iPhone. This is still like the most amazing thing because this is like circa 2011 as well. But he did maybe that date's wrong, but it was around that time. But he did a entire music video shot all on his iPhone with claymation for Leanne Rimes to her song Gasoline and Matches. Like just Google the video immediately and you'll see claymation matchsticks running around, and like I was like, this is wild. And so we drove up to San Francisco to meet with him. And I said, hey, what if you ran what if we created a whole Vine program, for the 49ers? He's like, well, admittedly, I'm not really much of a sports fan, but this sounds really wildly different. Like, let's do it. And so we started ideating on some of the content. We got Levi's on board as a partner. Did some really, really cool things in those first couple of years. And then in 2015, I left to go to Minnesota, and it was towards the start of the season. So my last game there was our last preseason game. My first game with Minnesota, they played at the 49ers week 1 at Monday Night Football. So very weird transition, like 1 week later, to then face your former team. But I knew, the social team obviously in Minnesota, and I was like, what if we did this? So even like when I was still in San Francisco, like, hey, can we do something when I'm at the Vikings? Can we still like kind of build this together? Like that'd be an amazing thing to kind of kick off. So it's kind of a series of Vines, kind of one team kind of taking a jab at the other. It was a series of 4, and then it ultimately promoted Tune In for the Game. So it's kind of one of those weird situations where 2 teams can work with the same artist to create compelling content going into a nationally televised game. So like, what are the odds? It just seemed like one of those things that we should do. So yeah, that was the story of that. We called it the Vine Kings. I think we eventually turned that in after Vine, RIP Vine, ended up transitioning that into Viking Quest. So kind of based off of the Entourage, victory. So anyways, it was a little bit more of a storytelling. We tried to do some stuff throughout the season and did that on kind of multiple platforms. So yeah, I didn't have one of those with the Falcons, though. If Vine comes back, we'll find a way to make it work and give it a fun name.
Love that. So cool, mate. So we're going to get into something in a minute. Before I do, you're a bit of a Ted Lasso fan. March 15, obviously written it, circled on your calendar. Pretty pumped about that. Which character do you relate to most, do you reckon? Which one? I'd say
Ooh,
Ted Lasso, surely.
Danny Rojas. Every time I drive into Atlanta United training ground, like it's so pristine. It's so pristine. There's like they have the pitch for the twos, and they have the main pitch, and it's just a beautiful facility and like tree
Yeah.
lined. And every time I drive in, I just say football is life. Like I have to think that every time I drive in, like it's just fantastic. So every time I see that, I just think of uh, Danny Rojas. So maybe him. Relentless enthusiasm and positivity.
Fantastic. Do you reckon you could do the flip? I mean, there's surely an opportunity. There's got to be
No.
some content around getting a British dude to come and coach the Falcons. Do the reverse, surely. What an
Yeah, we
opportunity.
could do that from United to Falcons. I'll let you pitch
Ah,
that
yeah.
to ownership and all the folks making the decision. But it'd be a good content play. So maybe if we can
Yeah.
sell doing it for the content, then I'm all for it.
Cool. All right. Let's catch up after this. And obviously, from what I've heard, I've it on very good authority. Obviously, from Australia, I'm shooting this show over here. Aussie rules. Now, I've got it on, as I said, got it on very good authority that you had quite a storied career as an Aussie rules football player. Tell us about about that. How'd you pick it up? How'd you go? What happened? Why'd you retire?
A buddy of mine who he also runs digital at the San Jose Sharks. You can have him on the podcast sometime, and he can tell you all about it. Invited me to play in an Aussie rules league. Ended up being roommates for a little while too. His name's Patrick Cooper. He got me involved with it, and of course, like I used to play soccer, so like can kick fairly
Kick
well. I
stuff.
used
Yeah.
I used to be fast, which is funny now. But yeah, so they had me out there, and I think one of the first, just like I think it was an actual game, and somebody broke their nose, and then the next week somebody broke their collarbone, and then I immediately started going to the gym. I think I put on like 20 pounds. I was literally out of self-preservation. Like I was
Just
so
scared.
scared. And I was like, I just want to not die playing this sport. And then I met my wife, and then we started planning a wedding, and she's like, you know what, you probably need to cut this out. If you're, walking down the aisle in a sling, that's probably not going to be great. So then
We're
after
getting
that, I
wheeled
just
down.
realized I was old and probably just shouldn't pick the sport back up, and that was probably the wise decision. So,
No, that's fair enough. Did you pick a team? It's very important.
um, kind of. One of the guys on our team is a big Hawthorne Hawks fan, so I know that's not your favorite, but it's been a while since
Disaster.
I've watched a game, so I don't know. It is a
It's all right.
really really fun sport. I wish people could get into that a bit more. It's unbelievably entertaining.
Yeah.
The folks who play are incredibly talented. It's a spectacle. So
Yeah, for
much
sure.
respect.
Yeah, you got to play it to really understand how much what they're really doing to
Yeah.
themselves. Well, this works nicely. So we've got a couple of slogans we've been throwing around here internally, but in the spirit of getting customers and target audiences, all that stuff involved, I'm going to run a couple by you. Um, you can imagine sort of a campaign and maybe some little graphics and stuff. But the first one is, and we're going to play on the Aussie thing for a moment, mate. We play football without pads. Of course, we can give you a single view of your customer. How's that one?
I love it. Go with it. Run with
We,
that.
I've
How
got
about
some more because we do heaps of cool stuff, mate. We surf 15-foot waves. Of course, we can integrate all your data on one CRM.
just take it to the
And
extreme. I love it. Okay, so first of all, I've never visited Australia. My wife had a client and
yeah,
a friend out there that she went to go visit. I'm still incredibly upset that I wasn't able to go.
Yeah, kills you. Because we do all this stuff. I mean, we wrestle 10-foot crocodiles, all that. We do it all, mate. We ride kangaroos to school, the lot. Everything you hear is true.
Mm-hmm.
Like the Simpsons episode with like
Mm-hmm.
Marge trying to order a coffee and stuff, and we just say beer. It's all that stuff.
Yeah. Foster's is your favorite beer, I'm sure.
Oh, it's
I
so
know
good.
that's
It's
not the
delicious.
case.
Yeah,
I do love the fact flat whites from Australian coffee shops are the best. They're the absolute best.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more. Yeah, and we will take
And
that. New Zealand think they've got that, but it's not. We're just going to have that. That's our
yeah,
invention.
and I say this as a Californian who, we pride ourselves on having fantastic avocados and avocado toast.
Oh, yeah.
Australian style avo toast is also phenomenal. And it probably beats out Californian avocado toast. I've said it. There's something that's bulletin board material to end the podcast.
Maybe you need to not go back to San Francisco for a little bit, just for a bit more self-preservation. But I agree. I think ours is well class. I don't know what it is about the way we do it, but it's just better.
It's really good.
For sure, Scott, mate. Thanks so much. Having a bit of fun at the end there. See if they kept listening after we finished up all the gold. You just gave us some amazing insights. You got such great, rich experience across the board. So, I mean, I've learned a lot. It's been one of my favorite episodes to do so far. So, I really appreciate your time, mate.
Yeah, well, appreciate you too. And now you can tell Tim far surpassed his moderation.
Yes.
He has a high bar to live up
to. See if he gets another opportunity, and I hope we get another opportunity too at some point too, mate. Thanks for joining.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me. This was great.